Many a times, our Black children, because of what they're experiencing, possibly in their environment, when they're experiencing a lot of domestic violence, they're experiencing a lot of they're home by themselves. And again, it's not a default of what has to take place or what is taking place. And a lot of times, parents don't realize, yeah, your child may be old enough to leave them by themselves, but if they have had a traumatic childhood or something traumatic in their household, or where they felt like they were always the under kid or they were the black sheep, that is something to pay attention to. But just understanding the reason why you see more, because it's being reported more. It's not that it hasn't been there. It's just that it's being reported more now. Same thing when it comes to men reporting domestic violence the same way. It's not that it hadn't been happening. It's being reported more.
Welcome, world. Welcome, family, to another episode of the EL2A podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Gilmore Jr. To the right, we got Mr. Military Man, Mr. Miles Tunco. How you feel today, brother? Feeling pretty good. Love to hear, love to hear. To the right of him, we got the Rocky. It's two boys are matching. Mr. Eddie Rock, how you feeling today, brother?
All right.
Feeling good. We're good. To the right of him, we got Miss Consuella Shaw, a licensed mental health counselor. How you doing today, Miss Shaw?
Doing well.
I'm glad for you to be here to stay. I told you before we started, we got a star on the stage, man. I'm glad there's somebody else on here that look good. That can help me out. You know, these two ugly gentlemen. So now we got balance. You get what I'm saying? You help me out. I don't got to be the one that, keep this podcast going. Look, so I appreciate it.
Okay.
I appreciate you. But we're glad to have you today. As you do know, come on. As you do know, we are getting to the end of the year. So I thought it would be perfect to have you on for a conversation with mental health. That's a term, a word, a phrase that's very famous right now, for lack of better words. Everyone is aware of mental health. And even to just kick it off with me with mental health for me has always been a thing that I felt like was, well, not mental health, but when you think about words that in mental health, so when you start thinking about depression, you start thinking about anxiety, all those different words, I always thought those words were excuses. When I heard those words, I felt as if someone was trying to make an excuse for them not being able to do something. And I'm pretty sure you don't all agree with that. And we gonna get into that. But I do want to start. We had a long history in this field. I think 18 years, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So kind of just give me how did we get here? How did you get into mental health, and what's kept you in it for so long?
Well, what started me into mental health was my family, actually. Okay. When I decided I wanted to go into the counseling field, one of the questions they ask is, why do you want to do what you want to do? And my answer to that was, I want to know more about why my family behaves the way they do. We were all 5 children brought up in the same home with the same parents. However, we're all different. And trying to understand, I grew up with 3 brothers. My sister is 9.5 years younger than me. So I spent more time with the 3 of them, understanding why the 3 of them are even so different, being that they were raised by the same parents. So wanting to understand more about my family is what brought me to this career. And now I'm being in it, a lot of how mental health impacts children, how mental health impacts just people in general has been very fun for me. I know people say, how is that fun? But it is. It's very exciting. And I love the fact that I get an opportunity to make an imprint on people rather than just have some passive conversation with them and saying something that could change their thought process or how they feel about themselves is really important.
Yeah. So thinking about coming up in that household with, so I guess all those different things going, what was actually going on? When you think about somebody that make you transfer from the way you grew up and how people were different to mental health, that means, so what were you seeing in your household that screamed, you get what I'm saying? There was something that, because my brain wouldn't work like that, okay? All y'all different, so something going on here. So what is that correlation?
Well, I think a lot about my oldest brother. My oldest brother was more of the renegade. He was the one that at, I think, 14 or 15, he decided he was leaving home. Who does that? Not back in those days. He decided he was just going to leave one day. And of course, not knowing what that means for him, he just decided to leave. And then my mom was more of, okay, when he gets back, I'll deal with that. Where most parents would have said, I'm going to look for him. She was more, okay, when he get back, I'll deal with it. And she did, the way parents did in that day. But just to know that that was his personality, that he was more of that individual person that I'm going to go explore, I'm going to go check it out, I'm going to go see. And my brother would go out of town and it was nothing for him. None of the rest of us did that. So that was foreign to us to see that. And I wanted to understand what makes him do that. Till this day, he's that brother that he'll call us. Now that he's older, he calls more, but we might hear from him once every 3 months. And he would call my grandmother to let her know he was safe, but that was just him. I have a middle brother that we called a pretty boy, and he was just that to us. He was the one, everything had to be in place. Every hair was in place. Everything about him was in place. He didn't want to touch the dirt. He didn't want to be, any of that. And I'm trying to understand, he's a boy. Why doesn't he want to go outside and play football? Why doesn't he want to? But to this day, my brother is still what we call the pretty boy, Then I have my youngest brother who, he was into everything. He was the one, he would go out and, hang out in the streets. He'd be among the roughest people. And he was still the nicest person, but don't catch him on the wrong moment. Yeah. Not the wrong day, but the wrong moment. Great guy. But again, just trying to understand, where did he get the idea of just hanging out in the streets or, all of that. And he went through that life for a while until he got a little older. And then here I am, I had to be in the house because I'm the only girl. So I get to stay in the house, and I had to watch them outside playing because I wasn't a boy. So going through that, trying to understand those dynamics. And then 9.5 years later, my sister come along. Well, I have to watch her. Why? Not my child. Yeah. I don't want to watch her. And so understanding that, I didn't realize that I was angry for a long time about those things, but how do I work through that for myself? But understanding how all my brothers and sisters saw the things that were the dynamics that were going on in our home. Mom worked a lot. My mom was a nurse, has been a nurse since my brother was born, my oldest brother. And so what do nurses do? Work long shifts, double shifts. My mom worked so much that we learned, my dad was the cook in the house. My dad got me up and did my hair for school and got me to school. So living in that dynamic was very different from what I saw when I got to school. Most of my peers, their mom would show up at school, and here is my dad, Yeah.
So how about that? So working through all that now, so getting to the point that you are now, being educated in this space, and now looking back on that era of your life, what would you say that was? I guess, like, why would you pinpoint that to? Because just getting into, so as I'm hearing you talk, I'm just thinking about all the boys that come through here, hearing their stories about what they got to do. We got some that have to be that parent.
Yes.
We got some that can't do certain things. They wish they could do certain things. Some that got too much freedom.
Absolutely.
So looking back at your situation, when you look at how you grew up, what do you, and I just heard you say your mom worked too much. What are some other things that I guess that may be the reason? I guess now looking back, you say, okay, all this was going on because of this. What do you associate that to?
One of the things I share with parents, with children, I share with a lot of people. One thing we must understand is parents do what they know to do until they know something different. And I explain, it's not a fault, it's a default. Because if we don't understand how our parents grew up and what they took as values, then we can better explain why they did a lot of what they did. Because how many parents say, I'm not going to be like my parents, or I want to give my kids more than what my parents gave me? What does that mean? And is that realistic? Because when our parents were coming up, they learned from what they saw and what they heard with their parents. And we know if we keep going back, they didn't have as much as what we do today. And so if we continue to live based on our parents, we're going to stay stuck in that space. I think about and I share a lot about the Geico commercial where he says, I could help you with your insurance, but I can't keep you from being your parent. Great example. I don't even know if he understood the analogy of what he said, but many a times we'll tell ourselves we don't want to be our parents and we don't want to be like them. But if we really take a microscope introspectively, we will see that we are much like our parents. When we see it, what do we want to do about it?
Yeah.
Right? Because I can look at my sister. My sister works and works and works. What did my mom do? I can look at two of my brothers and they work and they work and they work. But what did they see? My dad, he was a truck driver. He worked until he hurt his back and couldn't. But that's all we saw. So what do most of us take on? We take on that idea, I have to just work and work and work. And what is the saying? Oh, I got to keep grinding.
Yeah.
Why? Who said? Today is a lot different. What do we need to do so that we don't have to do what our parents did? But most people, we try to figure out what that is, but figuring it out is not an answer.
Yeah. I like that. So even now, so thinking about 18 years in this space when we're speaking about mental health, so you've seen like the rise and awareness of this coming along. So now that we're in 2024, what are some trends or some patterns that you're seeing, if just reflecting back on 2024, some things that may have been alarming or just that you're like, you guys need to know about this, or with the boys or your families, or just some things that's been standing out to you when it comes to 2024?
One of the biggest things that I've seen in 2024, which I am ecstatic about, is the influx of men who are taking mental health serious, who are actually getting involved in mental health and allowing themselves to be in mental health. Because most of the time, our men have been taught, they go to work, they take on they're responsible for everything, for everybody. But what I tell them is, how much can you be responsible for everything, for everybody, if you're not taking care of yourself? With that, I had the opportunity to work for several years with an all men's group, understanding how tradition, trainings, traumas, culture, society has told men, you're responsible to make sure everything and everybody in your house has everything they need and every need is met. How realistic is that? And then we look at the statistics of how many of our men have been having heart attacks, strokes, dying just unexpectedly. Well, if you had to take on as much as society has told our men to take on, how realistic is that for him to survive for the extended years that we're saying we want them around? And so that for me has been very big, because men are told they're not supposed to show their emotions. They're not supposed to cry. They're not supposed to talk about what's going on with them. You deal with it within yourself and you move on. Well, when self can't deal with it, what do he do? That's why we see a lot of the anger. And most of the time we want to say, oh, they're just angry men. Well, is it that they're angry, or there's something going on the inside that they don't know how to process? Most of the time, that's the case. And when a man is in fear, it can come out as anger. If he fears that something is not going to come out right, it's not going to work, or he's not sure about how something's going to happen, is it that he's necessarily angry, or is he frustrated because of all of the things that he's trying to process without any help?
Yeah. Even with us working, so work with the young boys. So we the same thing message that you're giving right now. We try to preach that to the boys, and you work with our young boys as well. They've done a great job with them as far as trying to communicate the same message. So the same way you say, same way we were raised. I'm pretty sure everybody on the stage will say the same thing. You bottled it up, you moved on, and you just figured it out, and just kept going. But now that we're in a space to where we're trying to, and you just said, I love that you just said more men are coming. Is that just so you have more men are coming, but are more, I guess on the flip side, are other people, are they encouraging these men to come? And it's just men say, I'm fed up. I can't win this battle and I'm just coming. And the follow up question behind that is how do we communicate this in a way that more men keep coming in, that the young boys, the message in that we can give these young boys to let them know that it's okay to express yourself. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to show your emotions. What ways can we go about as far as bringing more young boys up to know that that's okay?
I think a lot of what you all are doing here is starting at a younger age and creating the safe space. Because one of the biggest things that I've learned is the trust factor. Where does that come from? It starts when they're younger. And once you develop that distrust, it doesn't go away. In most cases, it increases. And in most of the time, they find that first with who is their first caretaker? Their mom.
Yeah.
And in many cases, when they get to the place where I can't trust my mom, how would I trust a female therapist? Even as a young man or as an adult. And so creating a safe space is one of the biggest things. And I tell people it's going to take some time to gain that trust. It's going to take some time for that person to feel safe. So it's not that if that person comes and says, I'm thinking about it, ask the question. So what are your thoughts? What is it that keeps you from it? What is your fear? Most of the time, the answer is, can I trust that person is going to keep what I say? Yeah. And that was one of the biggest things when I worked even with the all men's group. One of their biggest issue was they don't trust anybody. I have no trust anywhere for anybody. And most of the time it began, unfortunately, with mom. And what happens a lot of times is maybe the parent told them that they were going to do something for them and they didn't do it. Whatever the reason is. As a child, the child doesn't see whatever the reason is. The child sees you didn't do it.
Okay.
So then they ask again and then you forget again. Okay. And the child is saying, I can't trust you to bring me back a lollipop from the store, because the parent focusing on what they focus on. And again, it's not a fault of the parent. It's a default, because parents are dealing with whatever they have to deal with, whatever's going on in their life. It's not intentional. It is just a default of we live in a survivor mode most of the time. And being in that, we don't think that lollipop is that important, but it is.
Can me actually, oh, you about to say?
Yeah, not even that. So I think you said, you were asking, how do we show the boys that it's okay, or how do we get there? When you got most of the households that are single parent households and the mom is the dominant person in the house, and she's trying to, and because there are a lot of times when you hear some of the moms that we deal with, they're trying to, I'm teaching them how to be a man. Well, sorry, ma'am, but you're naturally emotional.
Yes.
So you're teaching him how to be emotional, and then when there's time, so you want him to be this loving and I guess masculine man, but at the same time, then when he display, like, I guess he doesn't know how to regulate those emotions.
Absolutely.
When he gets upset, because he was never taught, he was never shown how to regulate those emotions by a man. So when you in those households, or with those kids, that's the reason why they hold it in. So
absolutely,
when they become of age, when we see them lash out, that's basically what it is, So I think I always, Mr. J, he said five things about you where you can connect with the boys, and I always say I'm understanding, because you have to, like Jamie said, when somebody said mental health growing up in our household, it was mental toughness.
Yeah.
Mom showed us tough love, dad showed us tough love. But I think through those years of dealing with just growing, I had to come to understand it, because I have kids myself. So there are times that I'm sure, he could say that I am tough on them, but I also have to be able to realize, or I have to be able to understand why they may feel how they feel. So when it comes to the young men, when it's time to have those talks, same thing. Like you said, many times they're like, Mom, if we ain't gonna say that, I'm not gonna tell you because you're gonna tell my mom.
Right.
But there are other young men in the room that's gonna say that'll tell them like, nah, you ain't got nothing to worry about, because whatever we talk about is stay here. Building that trust, also knowing that at home though, and that's where it gets kind of crazy when we look at into the school system, because they can trust us. They're not able to trust the school. So it's crazy when you look at how do you get a child to understand that you can trust them? So again, when you coming up in a school, when you're in school and the kid flips out or there's something that's going on at home, they're not gonna be able to talk to you at school. So now they're just gonna lash out because you're gonna tell my mom, and now that those emotions, raw emotions, just come out. So I just sat and thought about that because it's when you know and when you understand that at home it's just mom. That's why you have so many emotional.
Well, I think to just address that part where, we have moms who, and kudos to moms who have to do it, by themselves. It is very difficult to raise any child by yourself. It's understanding and getting mom to be open enough to say, I can't teach a boy how to be a young man, but what I can teach them is morals, values. And that's what is happening. You're teaching them morals, values, and discipline, but we can't teach a boy how to be a man because we don't have that. We teach them their emotions. We teach them how to nurture because that's what we do. How to be a man comes from a man. I know many people will probably disagree. However, understand, we teach them morals, we teach them values, we can teach them how to clean up at home. We're teaching them these things. And that you teach both men and boys and girls, right? So what is it that says I have to teach him how to be a man? Telling him not to cry doesn't teach him to be a man. It teaches him to defy what is natural, which is our emotions. Our emotions, we were given those. They're natural, and we have been taught to suppress them, which doesn't help. If anybody has ever tried to stop themselves from crying, many a times you end up with tension, you end up with a headache, you'll talk about how your head hurts or your eyes hurt because you're trying to suppress what your body naturally does, and it causes adverse effects, which are the headaches, the tension.
Yeah, and in our community, especially when we talk about what allows these young men or these kids to express their emotions, especially these boys, they're already experiencing the heightened emotions. Being raised partially in a single mother household, it's stressful days. It's going to be stress that's going to pop up. You're going to see that emotion. I never needed to be taught emotions by my mom because I can already see that. The thing that was needing to be taught was from another man to say that it's okay. So a lot of times it's really men teaching men correctly. That's the gap that's there because the mom is already going to show that emotion. She's going to love on her baby boy. That's going to happen.
Yeah.
But when that baby boy is crying and now you have the male figure that's there or the one that's from the community that's stepping up to the plate to help that young man out, it's a shame on that parental figure or that mentor figure, that male figure, to sit there and laugh or make jokes to that kid in that moment because that kid in that moment needs to be told that's okay. So if not, that kid grows up harboring that, well, when I was around another man, finally, it's still like, well, I'm inadequate or I'm being reduced in my masculine role because I have these emotions that's been here for so long, but there was never a man telling me that it's okay to have them.
Absolutely.
And so for those single parents out there, that's why it's so important as well when we talk about the village structure, that the village is actually healthy itself. Otherwise, it doesn't matter if you have a village or not around that kid. If it's sick, that kid's going to be sick. Yeah. So we have to make sure that men out there are allowing these boys to sit there and express those emotions. Then you can sit there and come up with guidance and say, okay, now this is what it means to be a man, yada, 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 but this is okay. This is a normal experience. Everybody go through this, at some point in time. There are times in the service where you talking about war fighters, nothing but some of the baddest dudes on the face of the earth, but you will still see tears coming out of their face.
Absolutely.
Especially the right event. So it's never about that it's weak to cry or to show your emotions. It's what comes after it. That's the biggest point that's there. And I just think that we don't do a great enough job overall as men to embrace these young men, let them know that it's okay that you're feeling that. They've been harboring that for years. I can tell you that much.
Absolutely.
And I think it's a big thing. Even hearing you say that, I think it's a big thing
just coming from how we were brought up. So you get unlearn to relearn, you know what I mean? So we've been taught something a certain way for so long, it's kind of hard, especially for, I mean, even our age, but you think about people older than us, it's kind of hard for them to like, it's just flip the switch if you like be able to cater to emotions. We had a podcast, we talk about logic and emotions. I feel myself, I operate out of logic and not emotion as well. But even in a situation like this with a young man, I might be in an emotional state. I think even the conversation has to be too, because and this is we can go down a rabbit hole if we keep talking about it. But what are you being emotional about? You get what I'm saying? Because some of y'all be just emotional to get out of something. You know what I mean? We have to be able to make sure whatever those things. But again,
it's just having those conversations, right? Being able to have that conversation and understanding we normalize emotions because it's normal to have them. We do have what we call displaced anger. Where's this emotion coming from? And is this the proper time for you to deal with that or not? And then when is? But most of the time we're not taught that. It's something that has to be learned now because it wasn't a part of the original fabric when we were growing up.
And I think sometimes they need to be shut down. Just take
the scissors and cut it out.
Got to be shut down. But I do got something for you. I want you to listen to this. And as the licensed professional up here, I want to get your take on this. All right. So between 2014 and 2024, the suicide rate for young Americans aged 10 to 24 increased by 56%, with Black young youth experienced a 78% rise. So between 2014 and 2024. The suicide rate for young Americans aged 10 to 24 increased by 56%, with Black youth experiencing a 78% rise. In your opinion, why did this happen?
I think we have to really, and I'm glad you pointed out the Black youth, because there's this stereotype that our kids don't do that or we don't do that. Not true. It's just in our culture, things like that are taboo. We don't talk about it. What happens in this house stays in this house. How many people had that uncle that always stayed in the back room that nobody talked about because we know uncle had whatever his issue was going on, but nobody talked about him. And then when the holidays came around, people see the uncle around and they talking about, who is that? Okay, same thing. And with the suicide, it's just that it wasn't talked about. Many of times it was because we don't talk about that. That don't happen with us. And you better not tell anybody. And if they ask what happened, you just tell them they died or whatever. They come up with some reason. But the statistical rate that you're talking about has increased dramatically because, number one, we have to look at how society has changed. We have the World Wide Web. Not only do we have the World Wide Web, but how many other social media outlets have become prominent in that time. And with all of this, and it's not all social media, but social media plays a huge role in what our children are seeing and where are they learning behaviors from? What are they deciding for themselves is acceptable and is not? And a lot of that dictates to them, oh, you need to be this way or that way, or it's not okay to be this way or that way. And if I can't find where I fit, many a times when the youth can't find where they fit, they feel that they don't fit, they don't matter. I just want to be out of here. And that will happen. It's unfortunate because they're looking in one direction. If I don't fit on social media and I don't have the number of likes, or, I'm not getting people at school talking about my page and they don't see me, they deem themselves not important based on that little window. And so we see it with them many a times, our Black children, because of what they're experiencing, possibly in their environment, when they're experiencing a lot of domestic violence, they're experiencing a lot of they're home by themselves. And again, it's not a default of what has to take place or what is taking place. And a lot of times parents don't realize, your child may be old enough to leave them by themselves, but if they have had a traumatic childhood or something traumatic in their household, or where they felt like they were always the under kid or they were the black sheep, that is something to pay attention to. But just understanding the reason why you see more, because it's being reported more. It's not that it hasn't been there. It's just that it's being reported more now. Same thing when it comes to men reporting domestic violence the same way. It's not that it hadn't been happening. It's being reported more. And so when you see the statistics are based on what's reported, not what's not reported. And so now you're going to see those numbers. And in the coming years, you may see more because social media puts it out there. If it's going to be reported. And so they have more numbers now to be able to give, for lack of better terms, an accurate, for that time, a more accurate number of what this looks like so that people can start paying more attention to, there's a lot of Black kids that are committing suicide. And how many people were shocked the first time they saw one of our kids on one of those milk crates or on that post board that used to be at Walmart with the missing kids, because it was said that didn't happen. Is it that it didn't happen?
Wasn't reported.
Or it wasn't reported.
I like that. So I like how you brought up social media, because we obviously know that social media has its pros and its cons.
Absolutely.
But when we're talking about social media, most social media intake is happening on the phone. Me, myself, I have an idea of what I believe when a person should be allowed to have a phone. Let's just be honest. Most of you have phones these days, from elementary school to middle school. They all got phones. So as a licensed mental health counselor, what would you advise parents when it comes to phone usage? What is some advice that you would give when it comes to children having phones?
One of the biggest things that has prompted parents to give their kids phones at such a young age is when all of the school shootings happened.
Okay.
When they started having all of these different events happening in the schools, parents, of course, went hysterical, which is normal to happen. And they felt, my kid needs a phone at 7 because they need to be able to call me if something happens. Well, let's think about a 6, a 7, or 8-year-old with a phone in elementary school to call their parent. How likely, what is the reality that at 6, 7, or 8 in elementary school that they're going to call their parent first? What is the likelihood of that? They're going to be so scared, they're going to rely on whoever the adult is in the room to keep them safe. Because what are they taught growing up? The adult is the safe place, right? The adult will keep them safe. So in many cases, the child at 6, 7, 8 probably will not even think to call their parent first. They're going to think, I need to be safe, and they're going to go to that teacher or whoever they're with. So sometimes I would say that's the parent, okay? When they get in middle school, sometimes I could see, depending on the situation, but again, school shootings just exasperated the idea of giving children phones. We see kids as little as 2 and 3 with cell phones. I don't condone it because it's not good for their brains. I know it keeps them occupied, but there are so many different tools that they could use to keep them occupied that are more age appropriate, for one, and that doesn't give them so much access to just happen to click on something that they shouldn't click on. We have to think about, too, how does that impact their eyesight with them? Because when they're younger, I mean, some people, I've seen kids that are in strollers, probably, a couple months old, 9, 10, 12 months old, going into a year to 2 years with cell phones. And then the parent gets upset if the child drops the phone. But how realistic is that? If you think about it, they're a child. It impacts their vision. It impacts their minds and their brains because those screens move so fast that it impacts how they're seeing. It impacts their brain trying to keep up. And so while it is important to give them learning tools, the cell phone is not that. It was not created to be a learning tool.
Mm-hmm.
And so I agree with you that there should be an age. I have my own personal age that I feel may be appropriate. But again, I think we really need to look at when we give our children phone, because there are some kids that are in middle school who are just not responsible enough. And then the parent gets upset if they're on pornography. Okay. I think just let's be realistic about where our children are. I tell people we live in a society of denial. We really don't want to believe that my child at 13 is not responsible enough, but every 13-year-old is not on the same level as every 13-year-old. We really want to look at that and say, okay, if my child saw this, would they know to report it to me?
Oh.
How many people really talk to their children about pornography? How many people really talk to their children about if you pull up something and you don't, or somebody sing you something and you don't know what it is, not to open it? What's the reality of them not opening it?
No. Now I even see. I read before that most people win or lose the battle of mental health within the first 30 seconds that they wake up. And it was saying that because most people are picking their phone up right when they
Absolutely.
wake up, they go on to social media and they scroll. So, I know we just talked about kids, but this is the same thing when it goes over to adults, what I mean?
Absolutely.
They're getting on these social media platforms as well and getting hypnotized or getting more depressed or more anxiety
Absolutely.
from comparison. And we all know that comparison is the thief of all joy.
I totally agree. And one of the things I share with my kids is I tell them adults do it too. It's not just our children. And one of the things that's important to understand, remember, children mirror the adult that they're around. Whoever that person is or whomever those people are, they're mirroring what they're seeing. So how do you tell your child not to have their phone at the dinner table, but you have yours? And yes, I hear parents say, because I'm the adult. Well, are you the adult that wants your child to use you as a role model as to what to do, how to do, when to do? And that old adage that people say, do what I say, not as I do, doesn't work.
No.
Not today. It doesn't work. It put the fear in some of us, but today children are going to mirror what they see more so than what you say. Whether it's in front of you or out of your presence, they are going to mirror. And so that's why you see, I have a really good friend who has a learning center. You have 3 and 4-year-olds cursing. But you tell your child, don't curse. But where are they learning it? Right. They hear it. So they're apt to do more of what they see and they hear than more than what you say.
Nah, I like that. So let's move forward. So 2025, right? Right around the corner. There's a lot of people that's going to be watching this episode and they looking for some game, which we say guidance, attention, motivation, education from you, the expert. All right. So going into 2025, when we're talking about practical tips that people can take into 2025 to prioritize their mental health. What are some things that people can do to make sure that they're on the right track going into the new year?
I think one of the biggest things people can do is have a time of reflection. Sit down and really take introspect and allow yourself to be honest with yourself. Self-honesty is one of the biggest things that we are in denial of because sometimes we don't like what that brings. But self-honesty is what's going to help change the trajectory of what you want your next year to be. Because if you're not honest with yourself, are you really being honest with your children? Are you being honest with your job? Are you being honest with your family? Are you really being honest? And so when that happens, it's important that you really sit down and allow yourself to make that evaluation. It's going to be a process. It's not something you're going to sit down and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's going to really take some time for you to think about it. So the first thing I would say is sit down and make an evaluation. And the second thing is be honest with yourself. You don't have to share it with anybody else. You don't have to tell anybody else. But being honest with yourself is going to help change the trajectory of where you want to go. Mm-hmm. The other thing I would say is if you feel you're stuck, be honest enough to say you're stuck, and then start asking for resources. You don't have to tell anybody. And I know a lot of people say, I don't want to ask nobody for that or ask anybody. But if you never ask, you're going to stay where you are. And so the word is, if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you're getting, right? And then you want to expect a different outcome, and they say that's insanity. So how long will you remain in that space if you don't do anything for yourself? And the other part is, remember, anything that you decide you want to do, before you even launch out to do it, do what I call a POA, a plan of action. If you know There's some things that you want to achieve for the upcoming year. Sit down, make a plan. If you don't know how to make a plan, reach out to somebody. Call someone and say, hey, I'm looking to go in this direction. You may call somebody you don't even know, but you know they do what you want to do. Many of times people want you to reach out to them. They're asking, or they're looking for that person that wants to get more information and that wants to say, I love what you do, but I don't know how to get started. It's okay to ask the question. It's okay to reach out. And if you begin, and I love what you said a few minutes ago, how are you going to start your days now? Because if you want to change something, it starts from the time you open your eyes. Not that your feet hit the floor, the time you open your eyes. And the first thing you want to do is feed yourself the positivity you need to get to where you're going. If the first thing you're doing is scrolling on Facebook, you already defeated your day and where you're trying to go. Maybe sometimes you need to delete Facebook for a season so that you can really get yourself together and allow yourself to get into the reality of where you are so you can move forward. Don't be this year, next time saying, well, you know what? I ain't do that, but well, if you never change, the first thing you do in your day, you're going to keep getting what you're getting because you're not starting off in the right direction.
I like that. So you said self-reflection. What was another one? Self-reflection. The second one, you remember what the second one?
Honest with yourself.
Honest with yourself. And what was it? It was the third one? Self-reflection, honest with yourself. And was it third?
And then the third one is your POA.
Your POA. So what if I do these three things? Self-reflect, I'm honest with myself, and a POA, and stress me the hell out. Like I'll just stress out what I see with all these things. And if we all know stress, stress is the stem to bad habits.
Absolutely.
Bad decisions.
Absolutely.
So when I do my self-reflection, I do all that, I do my POA, now I'm stressed out, now I'm making bad decisions. Now I'm overeating. Now I'm doing drugs. Now I'm drinking because I got stressed out from all this stuff. And now this is leading me to the frenzy of what we're talking about that gets into this mental health. What do you say to that person that say, when I do these three things that you said, it just stresses me out? What do I do now?
So when you do your self-reflection, remember I said, you're not going to do it in one day. You're not going to do it overnight. You're not going to do it in a week. Many a times to sit and do that is going to take time. I would say if you feel that it is going to be that stressful and is that deep, do it in increments. Set aside some time for yourself. Whether if you're a single parent with kids, you need to put those kids on a schedule. They need to be in bed by 8:30, 9 o'clock. From 9 o'clock to 9:30, that needs to be your personal time. That needs to be the time where you decide, I am going to sit here and take the first 10 minutes and think about, what do I want for myself? What do I need for this time and this space of my life? You can't go backwards. You can't change whatever that has not been done in 2024 up until this moment. There's nothing you can do about it. Start from today and just ask yourself, what is it that I need from me for this time in my life? You may think of one thing today. It may be next week and you think of another. Set yourself boundaries for yourself. When it comes to really taking that introspect, it's important to set boundaries. Make sure when you sit down to do that, if you set, it's going to be 15 minutes, set yourself a timer. 15 minutes, I'm going to focus on this, then I'm getting up to do something different. Whether that is at self-care. If that means after those 15 minutes, I'm going to go stand in me a good hot shower, let myself relax and everything from today just wash away, then let yourself do that. That's going to be very important when trying to work through figuring out yourself. Allowing yourself to really deal with you. It's going to be a process. It can take some time. The next thing is when we talk about allowing ourselves to get into this space, we really have to decide, what am I going to do? That may require you not talking to some people.
Yeah.
And
I'm good at that one.
It may require, and a lot of people won't understand, but in order to change what you want for yourself into the place that you want it to be in, you have to evaluate the people that are in your circle. Who's talking to you? How much energy are you giving to things that don't give back to you for where you're trying to go? It doesn't make you mean. It doesn't mean you're rude. You're not being disrespectful, but you're preserving yourself for where you're wanting to go. And the more you allow yourself to do that, the more you're going to feel better, which will give you the energy to go and talk to the people you need to talk to, have a better mindset. When you start allowing yourself to dispel this energy that doesn't give to you, you're going to find you'll have more energy for the things that you really want to do.
I like this. So if you didn't have you may have an ebook, but if you don't, so say right now, and I know every person is different. All right. So everybody's situation, the way they approach mental health is different. But if we could just have a flat baseline, just approach for everyone. If you had to pick a couple things of habits and routine a person can wake up every day and do to improve their mental health in 2025, what would you, and again, I know it's different for everybody, but we just need a basic just for everything, a couple things that people could do every day to improve their mental health. What would you tell them to do?
Well, first of all, just remember everything that we talk about is not all inclusive. Okay. And so you yourself, if you decide that this is a track you want to be on or a person wants to go on, I would say you really need to talk to someone who can help steer you in that direction. I'm not saying that you need to necessarily just be in therapy to get that direction. Therapy can be that I just go and talk to someone once a month or once a quarter where someone can steer me in that direction. So what I would say, first of all, is I want you to think about what is your first thought when you first wake up in the morning. Everybody can do that. Be mindful of when your eyes open, where is your mindset? Because if that mindset is not in a positive place, how much positivity are you going to have in your day? The next thing I would say is be mindful of who you're going to interact with. Where are you dispelling that energy? Because the people you interact with are taking energy from you or giving energy to you. You get to decide. Is it something that you need to do? The other thing I would think about is start evaluating what things are you really responsible for. A lot of times people are taking on things that don't belong to them. That's not your stuff. If that was what your parents did, that's their stuff. Start evaluating what are you taking on that doesn't belong to you. And you'll find you will take a lot of stress off of yourself just by eliminating things that don't belong to you, that you're not responsible for. Make your children responsible for their stuff. If they're in sports, guess what? It's their responsibility to keep up with their cleats, to keep up with their pads, to make sure if they got to take stuff to school, that's their responsibility. Teaching them that early will help eliminate being that parent that when they're 23, 25, and 35, you still paying their bills or you still trying to take. No, that's not your responsibility.
Yeah. And I know community is a big thing too. I think we spoke about that earlier. So even in the state, as a community, as the people watching, we when you see people mental health, you see somebody maybe strung out on the streets doing something, we quick to laugh at or put them on social media and make a joke out of somebody.
Absolutely.
Because they may be going through a tough time. What are some things that we could do as family members or friends or community members to support people that may be going through a mental health crisis or just mental health moment, wherever however you that term is?
The biggest thing is education, because a lot of times people just don't know. And instead of saying what we don't know, we'll just, like you said, you may make mockery of it, not understanding that that person can't afford their medication. And so they're in that in-between space where they're not on their medication. And we must understand that those people are part of our society too. Understanding that the more you educate yourself with what do these symptoms mean, I can help somebody better. What are some of the symptoms of someone that's depressed? One of the biggest things I share just this past weekend doing a grief and loss group, sharing with them, depression doesn't look like what we were told it looked like back then. And so here we are looking for someone that, may stay in their room and then they don't come out or they just shut down and don't talk. Well, that's not necessarily what depression will look like. Is that a part of it? Absolutely. But knowing what depression can look like, because we could be sitting up here on this stage and somebody could be sitting here in a depressed mode, right? Or in a state of depression, and we would never know it. Okay. And so educating ourselves, allowing ourselves to get in that space. If you see someone has a mental health seminar, webinar, allow yourself to just sit in. Not that you have to participate, but just sit in to gain some knowledge and insight. Because in today, we see it even more. And the more we recognize it, the better we are to help our own family. Because there's a lot of people who see certain things in their family, don't understand it, and they're trying to figure out what is that. Just quick moment of transparency. I can tell you, I remember when I was younger having an aunt that I kept wondering why she would disappear. Didn't know where she was going, didn't understand why she would go away for a couple months and come back. Well, she was going to a mental health facility. Had no clue, because what does the family tell you? Oh, she just had to go away for a little bit and come back, and she'll be back. You know, she's okay. Not ever talking about she had some mental health stuff going on, right? And then so understanding that made me really upset because I was close to this aunt. And so understanding it's not okay just to dismiss it. Let's have the conversation. Yeah. And if you don't know how, ask someone to help you.
Like that. I want to get your take on this because you did mention medication. I think this is important. I think a lot of people, when they think mental health, they just think medication.
Absolutely.
You're supposed to be on medication. We probably can agree that medication is overprescribed when it comes to mental health. So what's the balance between mental health or medication and therapy that you don't need to take? You just need some more therapy. Like, what's the balance? Or I guess for somebody to know that, you just need a little therapy.
Yeah. I think just being honest enough to understand what the severity of it is, because there are times where if you just have never had that person that you could really talk to, you may feel that your situation is that severe when really all you need is a place to kind of dump. And that could be just therapy. Doesn't necessarily mean you need medication. I'm not an advocate for medication, but I'm not against medication, because sometimes if for instance, I work with people who are in, depression due to the loss of a loved one and how the loss came about, that their depression was so severe that, yes, I would be okay with you taking a medication for a period of time. The more you take the medication and the more you're in therapy, you can begin to now wean yourself off of the medication as you progress in therapy. So sometimes they can work hand in hand. I wouldn't dismiss medication, but I agree with you that medication is over-prescribed in many cases because it's an easy solution, or what people think is a solution. But sometimes it can make it worse too. Because some of the medications, if we listen to those commercials, and a lot of times I'm listening to them and I'm saying, so I'm depressed, but I'm taking a medication that could cause me to want to commit suicide, but depression can lead to suicide. So tell me how this is going to work, right? And so how many of us have seen those commercials and we'll tell I think I'll just figure this out instead of taking that. And so again, a lot of times it's just, I think, just allowing yourself, because you can go to your primary care doctor and they may say, oh, I can give you something for anxiety.
I was about to ask about that, but anxiety, because I hear that often. So do you feel that, I guess it's the same way, you feel the same way for the anxiety, you should have therapy over the medication, or is it medication over therapy when it comes to?
Well, I don't think I think we should not look at it one over the other. I think we need to look at what state the person is. I think it's individual. At what place is this person? Is the anxiety so severe that this person is in a space of where they don't want to go outside, they never interact, they don't do anything? Or is it that I can tell when I have this anxiety, and when I do, I just kind of move back, or I get in the corner, or so again, you see one person is learning to manage it a little better and may just need some therapy, where the other person to that extreme may need some medication to kind of start putting them in a place where they can start learning how to manage. It depends on the severity of it. And so I would tell people, listen, the best thing to do, talk to your primary care doctor. If you don't feel that primary care doctor really understands where you are and how you're really feeling, then I would say reach out. Most therapists will give you a free consultation. I give free consultations because I want people to be informed. And I tell them, treat a therapist the same way you would your primary care doctor. If you don't feel that primary care doctor hears you or understands you, then you're going to look for another one, right? Same thing with therapy. Give the therapy an opportunity, because if you go to one and you're like, I don't think that that's the person for me, reach out to another one or ask to be referred to another one.
When you think about resources, so are there any resources as far as books, apps that you refer to your clients when it comes to mental health?
Many a times I tell people, because again, going back to the phones, one of the biggest things I recommend for a lot of people, depression and anxiety, which are the biggest two things that we're dealing with, is there's what we call mindfulness apps, where those mindfulness apps, you get to choose kind of how long. I used to do them. I would choose one for 10 minutes or 5 minutes, depending on what my window of time I needed. And the mindfulness app basically just helps you bring your mind back into the now space. And I tell people it's so important to really get yourself regrounded. We do what we call grounding. You can put that in on YouTube and they show you how to do it. So you can go to YouTube, put in mindfulness, meditation, mindfulness, music, and mindfulness exercises, and it will help you with bringing your mind back in, allowing you to get yourself regrounded. And when I say regrounded, just bringing you back into your now so you can function in the place you need to be in. And a lot of times what people don't understand is anxiety is basically future-based thoughts having a present time impact, and it has a physical impact on your body. The more you can allow yourself to come back into the now, get yourself regrounded, regroup, ask yourself, those questions. Is this real? Is it something I have to do now? And then allow yourself to work in that. You'll find that you can really kind of get back on track. So doing that mindfulness, going online, pulling that up. When it comes to grief and loss, there's a lot of books out there. There's a lot of books out there. I think I have some listed on my website as well, because I do the grief and loss. So you can go to my website and see that there's probably a couple of things on there that will help. That's at www.assuagecc.com. You can go to my website and see some things on there as well. But just allowing yourself, if you feel that there's a mental health crisis or you feel that there's someone that may need help, 988. You can text it, you can call it. They even have where you can chat now.
I like that. So as we wrap up, great conversation. There was a lot given. I do want to say it's kind of two questions. I want to ask two questions in one, so I'm gonna kind of try to do it somehow. If you had to give one, one like piece of advice as far as people going into 2025 with mental health, that's one. So if it's like just one thing, and also thinking about like what is one question people should ask themselves, like right now reflecting on their 2024. When it comes to mental health, like what's one question they should ask themselves to make sure that they're going to 2025 with the right mindset in that regard. So if you can bobble all those two things together to give me a answer, that'll be my last question for you. Do you get where I'm going?
So your first
question was just 2025 mindset when it comes to mental health. Okay. And so they're kind of the same. So 2025 mindset when it comes to mental health, what should people be, as far as their mindset, their mind frame in regards to mental health? And then last thing, it was more so a reflection question. Like, what is that one question you need to ask them to make sure that they're reflecting and that they're moving into 2025 with the right mindset?
What I would say to people going into 2025, it is imperative, if you plan to do something different, want something different, the biggest thing you can do for yourself is be honest enough to say, did I do or is there something I can do to put myself in a better mindset? Your mental weighs so much more on you than anything else. So ask yourself, what am I thinking? What am I thinking?
I like it. Sure. So I appreciate you. What am I thinking? I appreciate you for being here. It was a great conversation. There's so much information when it comes to mental health, man. We having this conversation again. There's so many people struggling. We see it day to day when it comes from the families that we deal with, being in the schools. There's so many people dealing with it. And I understand that people can be able to have a resource like yourself, that our world will be a better place. So we hope that through the conversation that you guys will be able to, we'll have her give you the information as well, that you'll know you have someone to reach out to. If you're here local, I'm pretty sure you even talk to people via Zoom and Skype or whatever
Yes.
we got going on. So there's a resource here. So before we spin, I'll let you in. But fellas, do you got anything before we spin off?
No, that's good advice for the 2025. What am I thinking? That will help you shape your mindset for 2025 and thereon. So, good advice,
Brother Mosh.
Can you speak to the spiritual group? Because I know sometimes there can be a stigma between mental health and religion, and that's a barrier that has to come down because it doesn't dismiss your spirituality by talking to someone.
Absolutely.
So I know you're a woman of faith as well, and this is your profession. So if you could just say something to those people who may be on the fence, so who may be struggling with allowing that wall to come down and going to talk to someone.
Absolutely. I get that quite a bit. And it's always a privilege to be able to go into a church setting. And one of the things I say to people, remember, in the Bible, it tells us, so a man thinketh, so is he. And so if I'm checking my thoughts and they're not in the right place, what do I need to do? And if you don't know where to go, God has put people in place for this purpose. And so your faith is that I reach out to help myself. And faith without works is dead. So if you can be spiritual as you want, but if you're not doing anything to help yourself, then how good is your faith? Mm-hmm. It doesn't dismiss your faith. It says, you know what? I'm walking in my faith because I'm going to walk in those doors to that therapy office and I'm going to sit on that couch and I'm going to just let them say what I need to say. And I'm going to feel good about it. And so a lot of times what happens too is a lot of people, and we're not going to even go into that, but a lot of people will not go to the church and talk. Okay. And so if you're that person that says, I believe in my faith and I know what I've been taught, remember what you were taught is good, but does it fit for where you are in your life right now? And if it's not getting you the results that you need, then that means you may need to add something to it, which is therapy.
Collection plate. Come on, bring that collection plate up. She cooking, but no, man, that was great. What I need y'all to do right now, you know how this go, man. Right now, at this moment, make sure you stop right now, like, subscribe, and comment. This has been a great conversation, and we want you guys to interact with it, man. In the comments, put anything in the beliefs that you may have. We'll comment back and we'll have the conversation, and as well, we'll connect you with Miss Consuella if you need that help. But what I need you to do, so make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. All right, Happy New Year. New Year's coming up. We in the new year.
Merry Christmas.
We'll be there. So, I mean, it's a great time of the year. I just, again, we're thinking about going into 2025. I already know everybody is so excited. So everybody is so ambitious, man. But what we're talking about, it starts here. And that's why we're having this conversation the day before we start 2025, because it starts right here. Mm-hmm. And if you can get your mental right, you can prepare yourself to get your discipline right and all your consistency and all the habits you need to be successful. And I believe in everybody can do it. So, Ms. Consuella, as we're rolling off, what all I need you to do, I need you to look at that camera right there. Tell people where they can find you and just send us off with a positive message, however God moves you, whatever you want to say to end the podcast. Is all on you.
I'm Consuella Shaw, licensed mental health counselor. I am, my business is Assuage Counseling and Consulting. You can go to Facebook, Instagram, and my website is again, www.assuagecc.com. That's ASSUAGECC.com. And one thing I tell people, self-care is not selfish, and no one can take care of you better than you. Happy New Year.
Like that. Happy New Year, man.